when they added property rights supporters to the list of possible terrorist organizations. All right, next up to talk mainly about Audit the Fed, and again, whatever else he wants to talk about, is Matt Hawes, the Vice President of Programs at Campaign for Liberty. Matt started with Ron in his congressional office in 2005 and then moved from there to the presidential campaign and then over to us at Campaign for Liberty. I will say, Matt, I think I got my last email from Matt at 3-something this morning, another bit of copy he was trying to get out real quick. Matt and his staff put together last night the little email blasts that we sent into those 13 districts of the traitors or the flip-floppers or whatever you want to call them. Matt is one of those guys that every organization needs. It seems he's available almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think although we did let him take a vacation in January and he only responded to about half the emails and calls he got. So Matt Hawes is going to come up and talk about Audit the Fed and our efforts and the efforts in the House.
Available 24/7, so you don't have much else going on. So, hey, I'm around to answer emails. We wanted to kick this thing off today by having a few people in to talk about the issues we're going to be focusing on this year. So Doug was gracious enough to come over and talk about Patriot Act and balanced budget. Of course, we got the doctor to come talk about healthcare. We'll be focusing a lot on ending the mandate this year. But our top priority, again, for this session of Congress, as it was last time, is going to be the bill to audit the Federal Reserve. Ironically enough, it was here 2 years ago, I guess in the hotel across the street, so technically still here. It was here 2 years ago at the Liberty Forum that we announced this effort to audit the Fed. Back then it was H.R. 1207 was the bill. Congressman Paul had just introduced it, I think, a day before. With only 11 co-sponsors, and we passed out a flyer around CPAC, which just pretty much like this. Passed out one saying, contact your representative and get them to co-sponsor HR 1207. These flyers are actually for the new bill. I think we've had 1,000 of them printed up, and they should be available if you want to grab them and pass them out again today about Audit the Fed. But we printed those up, and we figured we would start an effort that really we didn't know for sure where it was going to go. We knew the potential was there, we knew the grassroots support was there, but we just didn't know where it would end up at. Ron had introduced the bill, I think 2 times before, and both times he did, they didn't get all that many co-sponsors. They didn't make much noise. I think the record was 44 co-sponsors, was the highest he'd ever gotten before. And coming off of his presidential campaign, it was thought, well, here's, as the press likes to say, here's gadfly Ron Paul again, with this crazy idea to audit the Federal Reserve. No one cares, no one's going to pay attention. And we found out they were wrong. They were just as wrong about that as they were about a whole bunch of other issues when it came to Dr. Paul. So we started here, passing out the word to other people, getting them to call their representatives. It was less than 2 months later at our St. Louis regional conference, our first ever regional conference, where we came out and said that Audit the Fed was now up to 49 co-sponsors. In 2 months, we had been able to get more co-sponsors for the bill than Dr. Paul had ever had before. We'd already set a new record and shocked a lot of people. But still it continued. I figured, well, this is good. This is a little bit of life from this little grassroots group. Back then we were just over 100,000 members, weren't very big. And figured, that's probably it. That's what the mainstream media like to say, this is probably it. Well, it kept going. And so finally, in September 2009, we had almost 300 co-sponsors. We had over the majority of the House of Representatives on board, and we were able to hold our first committee hearings on the bill. Something completely unprecedented, something that had never been done before. And it was actually at that committee hearing where Tom Woods, who'll be coming up next, came in as Dr. Paul's witness about all the Fed, and the Fed sent over their general counsel. Ben Bernanke still wasn't bothered enough to come defend this bill or defend his Fed before the Financial Services Committee, so he sent one of his little guys to come over and do it for us for him. So he sent over his Fed general counsel, and it was there that Dr. Paul said probably my favorite thing that he's ever said. Lots of good speeches, lots of good lines, but to me it just all got captured up in this one moment. They had to adjourn for a minute to go vote over in the House. And Dr. Paul was one of the first ones back. And because he was the ranking member at the time, he pretty much had control of the subcommittee right then. So it was him, a couple other congressmen, a room packed full of Campaign for Liberty and Young Americans for Liberty supporters, and the lonely old Fed general counsel sitting there at the table trying to defend himself. And Dr. Paul came out, sat in his chair, and looked at him and said, "You're very lucky. I'm back, and I have unlimited time." And to me, that really summed up exactly what was happening. The Fed was just there trying to defend itself against Ron Paul, who they had written off a long time before, and all these supporters where they had no idea where these people were coming from. So we went from there, we passed it through the House of Representatives, again, unprecedented, never had been done before. We got to the Senate, and Bernie Sanders, who had originally co-sponsored our bill, decided, well, the Fed seems to be making some pretty good arguments, let's water this thing down a little bit. So we had some trouble there, and ultimately, of course, the committee reconciling the Dodd-Frank financial bill said, yeah, what's the point of a full audit? Let's do this little one over here. They did that, thinking that would buy us off, thinking that was enough. Does anybody out there feel like that was enough? No! I don't think so either. Another high point of this first effort that we did was Rasmussen Reports released a survey saying that 74% of Americans agreed that it was time to thoroughly and completely audit the Fed like Ron Paul's legislation would do. 6 months before that, 74% of Americans didn't know what the Federal Reserve was. And there we were, spreading the word, dutifully taking the task before us, and going out there and challenging one of the most powerful organizations in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we made the Fed hire a PR department. I mean, think about that. These guys have been in secret doing their own little things since 1913, and now they had to defend themselves with a PR department on Capitol Hill, Bernanke making more trips than he'd ever made at Capitol Hill before, saying, please, please don't audit us. We looked the most powerful institution in the world in the eye and made it blink. So here we are again. Bernanke has been out in the media saying the first audit that was passed, well, that's plenty. That's all you guys need. That's more than enough. But Congressman Paul says, no, I don't think so. So he has reintroduced, this is it, right here, HR 459. That's it. 3 little pages that, given a better printer, would probably fit on even less. So that's all it is. 3 little pages to change how monetary policy is done in this world. There's a few criticisms the Fed likes to advance in the legislation. For one, they say, well, that audit, we gave you was enough. We told you who our credit facilities were lending to, and that should be plenty for you. Well, for one thing, as Bloomberg pointed out, sure, the Fed said a lot of the credit they were giving out, but they refused to say who had received or who had pledged collateral up to $885 billion of what they had dealed out. They refused to say what those individual securities were. Even somebody that used to work for the Fed, a former Fed research director, said that's a half step. That's not a real audit. So even he had to come out and admit that. We found out even more through the little audit that was done. News items like the Netherlands Rabobank and Canada's Toronto-Dominion Bank, both banks with AAA ratings, secure, firm-footing, good banks, took more than $20 billion of our money in combined loans. You know why they did it? Their executives said, hey, here's a chance to make some cash. Look good to us. And that's what the Fed's been up to. We found out they gave money to McDonald's, they gave money to Harley-Davidson, and called those financial institutions. So it shows you how much they were stretching things. So imagine with just that little bit they gave us there, imagine what else they're doing off to the side that they don't want us to know about. That's why Bernanke's out saying right now, oh, no, don't look over here, look over here. Look at this nice shiny object we gave you. Don't look at all the stuff that's going on over here. So I think just that little bit that we had shows us we need to find out more. We need a full audit, we need a complete audit like in Ron and Rand Paul's bill. Yeah.